Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Noble and welcome to the channel and the ultimate Star Wars The Old Republic PvP guide. Guys, this is the only video you're going to need. We have so much to cover and I'm going to explain as many things as possible. So you guys know what this video isn't. I'm not going to be going over every single Warzone and how to play them, because once you play them once, you generally know how they go. We are going to be looking at the fundamentals of PvP and how you can go from dying off spawn to getting no deaths almost every single match depending on your playstyle. We're going to be covering keybinds and movement, the things I like to use in my UI that I think can benefit every single player, CCs and stuns, and basic strategy, as well as situational awareness. So that is what is in store. Don't forget to subscribe, guys, if you like this video and want to see more guides like this. So let's start off with our keybinds. So no matter what class you play, you're going to have a lot of abilities. Now, there is a huge difference in PvP between someone who keybinds and someone who clicks. If you look at the screen right now, this is what it looks like when you're clicking all your abilities. Look how slow that is, right? You're not able to get off the abilities nearly as fast as if you would have keybound. You are doing essentially too much, and that is what's making you really bad and really slow. This can be easily changed. Now, the first thing that I'm going to recommend as far as hardware, if that is something that you guys can afford to get, I would recommend the Razer Naga Trinity. You can get it for about $60. This is going to give you the ultimate amount of freedom and mobility with your keybinds, and I'm going to explain why in a little bit. But if you don't have an MMO mouse, there are definitely other reasons to pick this up. I don't know if you play any other games like Apex Legends or Fortnite. If you're a little bit more competitive, this will also help you with those other games. So if you're thinking about getting it and you're on the fence, think about using it in every game you play. I promise you it will be well worth your investment. So with that being said, here are some more deep dives into keybinding. What is the one thing you as a newer player or an inexperienced PvPer struggle with? That's getting off all your abilities and then panicking and figuring out what to do. Putting in keybinds really does eliminate that fear. It will probably take some getting used to in order to figure out, what buttons you press and in what order and stuff like that, but overall in the long run, you are going to become relatively unstoppable. When it comes to specific binds, the first thing, guys, that I want you to do is unbind your S key. That is the most useless keybind in all of Star Wars The Old Republic. There is no reason for you to be traveling backwards in PvP or honestly in any part of the game. This is a tab target MMO, meaning as soon as you cast an ability on someone, it's hitting them regardless of what direction they're moving. The only way things don't hit a target is if they go out of range before you can cast the ability. So having your S key bound is a literal waste of time, and it just makes you an easier target. You're moving slower. So when we think of movement, we are looking at how we can move around people faster to make them a little bit more disoriented and confused. And backpedaling is not something you need in this game at all. Not when you don't have to dodge or parry anything. For beginner keybinds, if you don't have a Razer, Naga, or anything like that, one thing that I would at least try to do is after you have your normal 1 through 12 or 1 through minus and plus or equal sign on your keyboard, look to add shift to your other auxiliary abilities. So your offensive cooldowns, defensive cooldowns, you want to put those on like shift +2 or shift +3, whatever is most convenient for your hands to work with. This is where having a Razer Naga comes in, because you can essentially still hit your 1 through 12 from the thumb and use your left hand for shift. It's going to make things so much faster, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. In PvP, you want to look at doing these two things: doing the most possible damage or doing the most possible healing or tanking, while at the same time being freed up to make quick changes on the fly. So like I was just talking about getting rid of your S key, I want you to essentially unbind your Q, your E, your A and D. You can keep W, but everything else, Q, A, S, and E, get rid of those. You don't need them because I'm gonna show you how to move better in the game. Most of the time when I'm watching PvP or even just beginner players, if they're doing a playthrough of something, they will use WASD and then use Q and E to kind of pan around. That is not going to be optimal in PvP. You're gonna move too slow, you're not gonna be able to see where your target is, and you're gonna get all disoriented and confused. So a better way to essentially control your character is just by using your mouse. If you hold down both right and left click, not only will you go forward, but you'll also be able to turn the camera whenever you want. This is going to feel a little weird to some people if you've never done it, but trust me, once you get used to the sensitivity, you're going to be able to move around a lot faster. You're going to be able to see things quicker than you ever could have in the past. Now, what is the main thing that this does? This frees up your left hand for keybinds. If you can get all of your movement on your right hand that's controlling your mouse and using your left hand to execute commands and other things, you're going to be so much faster. Once you've learned how to move with just your mouse, that is going to give you a huge advantage over the person you're fighting, and if a lot of other people on the other team aren't doing that, you're gonna have a huge advantage over that team. Another thing on movement that's really important is your camera max out distance. You can go into settings and change this. I set mine at 64%. You don't need to be super close into your character when you're doing PvP or even PvE. It really just takes away information. You want to be zoomed out to a point where you can essentially see your whole character and then a good bit surrounding you in a 360-degree view. You want to be able to see what's coming at you, what's behind you, to make the best decision possible in PvP. So I would go into your settings and set your max camera distance to between 60 and 70%. That's going to give you a much greater field of view, and you're not going to panic as much if someone gets behind you. Once you're able to see everything around you, you can then go into a little bit more of the key binding and focusing more on your abilities, since you're not always going to have to be looking to turn around to find your target. So this next part is definitely preference, but this is something that I would genuinely recommend that everyone use no matter what role you play in the game, whether you're a tank, DPS, or healer. I will say most of this comes in handy if you are a healer. You're not going to be paying attention to these numbers as well, but if you don't have your ops frame showing texts and information, you're going to want to enable that right away. You're going to want to make your quick bars as thick as possible so you just kind of get a bigger feel of what situation your teammates are in. So if you know that someone is getting low, if you're a tank, you can switch your guard. If you're a healer, you can go peel and essentially get them to full before they know what's happening. So make sure to go into your interface editor and enable show health on text, show information on text, right? You don't need to have every single setting shown, like some debuffs and buffs, unless you're doing some raiding content. Like, you don't really need it for PvP. You just need to know the health. That's about it. The next thing here, guys, is really important, and this will save you in so many ways, especially if you are a DPS, okay? This is target of target. This is something that I have enabled on every single character. What is target of target? It literally is how it sounds. It shows you what your target is looking at, whether it's they're looking at you or a teammate. Why is this important? Is because say you're in an arena game, right? And you're playing a pretty competitive, tank heal game. You're going to need to know when people swap to other characters so that you know who to focus, right? So if you're attacking a healer and they're focusing on the tank, well then you probably can go for a DPS swap and try to get them down before the healer can switch onto the DPS to start healing them. This can go for literally any character that you're coming up against, and it's huge when you have that information and can relay it to your team if you're in Discord or something. Some people I saw don't have this equipped, but make sure you have the target cast bar enabled, and if you want to go a step further, you can have the target of target cast bar enabled. This is really just going to give you more information as far as what abilities maybe you should stop or interrupt, or just let you know what's coming so you can figure out what to do. Because say you don't have an interrupt available and there is a ambush that's being warmed up ready to hit you in the face. Well, you can probably go and find some cover to cancel that ability. Remember, if you don't have an interrupt available, and if you can LOS, that means line of sight for all you noobs out there, then you can cancel someone's ability, and that'll save you a couple valuable seconds. That could be enough time for a cooldown to, be ready for you to use, and you have a better advantage in any fight, whether that's an arena or a regular 8v8 warzone. When it comes to the interface editor, outside of what I just mentioned, everything else is relatively up to what you like. I usually make sure that I show my buffs and debuffs, whether it's on myself or on the enemy, just so I know, hey, maybe this guy CC'd for a reason. Then I know what dots I should or shouldn't apply depending on the type of stun. Just make sure you have that stuff available, because it's just more information that you can see to make the best decision possible and what your next move is going to be in order to win that fight or win the game. One thing that I want to touch on real quick, if you are having trouble remembering when things come off cooldown or just having trouble with those cues in general, then go into your settings, go into the user interface, and you can select show cooldown text. This is going to give you numbers in real time for when things are coming off cooldown and when you can use them again. I found this really helpful when I got started, and I sometimes use it, but generally speaking, I don't anymore. But if you're someone who just needs that extra reminder, then I would highly recommend you turn this on. Moving on to CC and stuns. Now, I do have a video covering this specifically. It's about a 15-minute video going into a deep dive of how to use stuns and what to do when you come up against them. So I will give a good overview here for anyone who hasn't seen that video yet. CCs and stuns are essentially the death of most beginner players because, as I said earlier in the video, people panic, and when they panic, they don't make good decisions. CCs and stuns can be very useful, whether it would be in your favor or against you, and you can use it to your advantage. Let's start off with a couple CCs and stuns that I know some of you guys, can't break. You can't break the Bounty Hunter Electrocute, that would be the Vanguard's Cryo Grenade. You can't get rid of the Debilitate from the Agent or the Dirty Kick. Those are things that no matter if damage hits you, you're still going to be stunned. Those are hard stuns. Those are a little bit more dangerous than your soft stuns or your soft CCs. That would be the Guardian Awe, that would equate to the Marauder or Juggernaut, not Force Scream, but Intimidating Roar. Then you'd have things like your Concussion Mine and Concussion Grenade if you're on the Trooper, or Concussion Missile if you are on a Bounty Hunter. And then you have your Flashbang if you are an Agent or a Smuggler. And then you have a Whirlwind or a Force Lift if you are a Counselor or an Inquisitor. Those are abilities that stun you, but as soon as you take damage, that stun effect immediately is removed. These are things that people don't seem to notice anymore, which is odd because you can win or lose games if you time these things right. This is what I see most of the time in regular 8v8 war zones. If I am going to cap a node in Alderaan Civil War, then I'm going to make sure that I at least hard stun. If I'm not gonna bait something out, right, I'm going to hard stun my opponent. I'm going to then start capping the node. If they use their CC breaker, then I know, boom, I can flashbang them or go into stealth and use my sleep dart and then cap the node all by myself. It's because they broke their stun too early, they panicked, and now they're trapped with no way to get out. You can't, call for reinforcements. Well, I guess you can, but it'll be too late, and that's what gets a lot of people killed, and that's what gets a lot of people to lose the objective. So how do you deal with CCs and stuns? It is case by case, but generally speaking, the first stun is almost never fatal. Unless you're playing arenas and you have a super coordinated team, your first stun is not going to be fatal to you. If you get stunned, don't use your CC breaker. The only time where you should be using your breaker in any PvP sense is if you're trying to stop a node from being captured, and by that, I mean, let's say they are a second away from capping, an actual second, not 5 seconds, an actual second away from capping, you break and stop the cap, then that might have bought you enough time to have reinforcements come in and save the game. That's an example of when breaking a soft CC or something would be useful. Another thing to keep in mind for any of these capping maps where you have timers is most CCs last longer than the timers, or they're basically the exact same. So it used to be you could get a full node cap with a flashbang or a sleep dart or something, and I'm pretty sure that's still the case, but depending on when you get stunned and when they start capping, sometimes the stun will just wear out on its own, okay? And you'll be able to save your CC breaker and still stop the cap. These are things you want to think about when it comes to your stuns and CCs. A really easy tip here, guys, is to never break until you're full resolve. That's the little bar next to your head as the player icon. Once that's fully white, you can't be stunned, so you might as well break and go on about your business. But again, use that sparingly and make sure it's the best situation to break on. Sometimes you can be white barred and stunned and nothing's happening to you. So just let the stun wear off and go back to fighting unless there's something crazy that you just have to stop. This is the easiest thing that's going to show the most amount of growth when it comes to your PvP, if you can figure out when you should or shouldn't use your CC breaker. Now on the other side, let's talk about applying the stuns. If you know that there is a huge fight going on, don't flashbang, don't whirlwind. It's a real waste of an ability when splash damage is going to hit your target and you're gonna waste your stun. There's nothing to do at all. You're completely stuck. Always make sure that if you're gonna stun in a group of people, make it a hard stun so that no matter what, the damage is done and they can't do anything and you can keep going. The only times you should use your soft CCs is when you're going for a cap, or if you've got someone stranded, like in arenas. I'm thinking like if you stun a tank, you awe them or something, and then go back to fight someone else. That's the only area where I could see that being a little bit more beneficial. But again, that's all been broken down in another video, so I'll link that below if you're interested. Now let's talk about basic strategy. This just comes down to game sense, and I understand maybe some of you are newer to PvP, so you don't have a lot of basic strategy and a lot of game sense. So I do also have a game sense guide out there for you if you're interested. Those are all older, but they still apply to this day. So what does it mean by basic strategy? Well, if you're a DPS, a healer, or a tank, they're generally the same, but we'll go through all the roles and give you a brief overview. If you're a tank, your basic strategy is to keep your healer up and to swap guard, whether it's from your healer to your DPS or vice versa, back and forth. The tank's main role is to keep everyone else up and to take the most damage, not in a healing perspective, but to help someone stay alive long enough for the healer to help them. So if you're a tank and you're playing PvP, your first thing really shouldn't be anything but to maybe take the brute of some damage, similarly to PvE, and peel when necessary. Tanks should not be the ones capping a node or anything unless it calls for it, unless like there's no one else around. Typically I will have the DPS cap it if at all possible, but when it comes to regular 8v8s, who's capping it doesn't really matter if the strategy is in your favor and you're kind of rolling a team or something. If you're a healer, you gotta stay the heck back, and this is actually something that I wanted to talk about earlier, but I wanted to save it for this segment. Ranged versus melee strategy. I see this all the time. I saw it today when I was recording footage for this video. So many people, so many ranged players were going into melee range. Guys, there is no reason as a ranged player to be anywhere within 30 meters of your opponent. There isn't a reason. You can use all of your abilities at, you guessed it, range. This is why a lot of people who struggle with playing mercenary and commando, even I did this in some background footage probably, because I was just getting background footage. Like, you'll see people go right up to a melee class and start firing, and then they wonder why they die on a ranged class. Because they're not playing range, they're playing range and melee range. That is something that you gotta work on not doing, especially if you are ranged. Well, all the healers are basically ranged these days, but like, especially if you're a healer, you don't need to be in the fight at all. Now, you'd need to be in range of your tank, and your tanks intercede if they are, melee tanks. That's like, what, 20, 30 meters or something like that? They can get back to you if you need help. You don't need to be next to them holding their hand. That is something that you gotta figure out, 24/7, because if you don't know what you're doing there, you're gonna have a lot of issues in range. In melee, it's the same thing, but obviously reversed. You want to be close up to your target. There's no reason why you shouldn't be less or more than 10 meters away from your target, whatever your abilities will allow you to hit. I mean, you're gonna have to have some healers focusing you, maybe, depending on the game, but you gotta know what your strength is. If you're melee, you're up close. If you're ranged, you're far away. 30 to 35 meters if you're ranged, 5 meters or less if you are a melee. The next thing I want to talk about is stims and gear. A lot of people have been asking me about gear, and to be honest, you have two different camps. You have your arena play, and then you have your regular 8v8 play. 8v8's gear is not as important as arenas. I would say if you're going to be playing arenas, you don't want to be anything less than gear rating 330, in my opinion. 330 is the floor, and then anything from that is fine. But in regular 8v8s, anywhere from 317 to 330 is okay. Don't let anyone bully you into saying you don't have enough gear, because I'm going to be honest, guys, on a lot of my characters, I don't really play as many of them as I used to, but because of that, I'm playing on characters that are item rating 317, and I'm smoking people, okay? It's not just about gear. Gear is definitely a factor, but if you combine gear with game sense and knowledge of the game, right, you're gonna be fine. So don't get hung up on gear if you're doing 8v8s, but it does help you. So just get the gear as fast as you can, but it's not the end-all be-all. When it comes to stims, guys, don't go into war zones without stims. There's definitely videos on the screen of me not using stims because I just needed background footage for this. So I think I did go and buy a stim just for video purposes, but always use a stim, especially if you're playing in arenas or something. They give you that little extra nudge, okay? Personally, if you're DPS, just go with the versatile stim. They have them for pretty much anything, whether you need something for, more endurance or more power, just go with the versatile stim for most DPS. For healers, I would say do the same thing. Tanks, I don't tank anymore, so I don't know what's good as far as stimming for tanks, but I imagine it's something that, will keep that endurance up. I like to look at stims and gear as the cherry on top. Stim definitely is a must no matter what. Gear in 8v8s is kind of up and down. Play at your own pace, get the gear as you wish, but then in arenas where we're looking at more complicated stuff, gear is a must, stim is a must, game sense is a must. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this 2024 PvP guide. I hope I've done a good job at explaining my position for some of these things we covered. I will be getting into more in-depth class guides, not so much ability use type guides, but more situational awareness and what to do when things happen. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for it, but I wanted to get this video out first for any new players that are interested in PvP and want to know how to get started the right way. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please guys subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share it with one person. I would really appreciate it. I spent a lot of time putting this together, and I want to keep doing this for a long time. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Noble. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.